One 23-year-old American during this day there, during the rescue operations. Let's check in on what's happening this evening, or indeed in the early morning hours Eastern Time here in the United States, from Alessio Vinci. Alessio, what can you report?
Well, Garrick, it's been 40 hours or so since the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center have been collapsed after being hit by those two hijacked planes. And as you can see behind me, 40 hours later still a white cloud billowing atop the rubble of those two 110 stories building on the ground there. Hundreds of rescue workers, paramedics, police officers, all involved in this rescue operation, trying to figure out if there is anybody perhaps that may still be alive under that rubble. That we spent some hours earlier today. We saw several refrigerator trucks arriving into the scene, presumably to take some of the bodies or body parts out. We also saw a long line of dumpster trucks that were obviously being used to bring some of the rubbles away from the scene and make room for more trucks to go in there and take some of the more rubble out. We understand so far 3,000 tons of rubble have been removed early today. The mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, said earlier today that 82 bodies have been found inside the rubble. Only 16 of them have so far been identified. This tells us a little bit about how intense this collapse of this building was. If so far only 16 bodies have been identified, the rescue workers there are telling us that mainly they have been finding body parts. Of course, the number of casualties as the rescue operation continues is expected to rise dramatically. Mayor Giuliani has requested to the Federal Emergency Management Agency 6,000 body bags. Meanwhile, the entire area of south of 14th Street here in Lower Manhattan has been sealed off by the police. Several blocks in this area remain without electricity. That is why many people have been evacuated, especially the elderly people, especially in this building right behind me. As you can see, a dark black building behind me. And of course, some other people chose to live on their own. However, we also met some Manhattan people here in Lower Manhattan who decided to say, one person telling us, look, I lived here for all my life. I don't really feel like leaving at this time. Back to you, Garrick.
Alessio, I think looking at these scenes there and your reporting there, a question that comes to many of our minds is, this is a 24-hour ongoing operation. Will be for weeks, months to come to get that rubble out and complete the search there. How long are these shifts, the workers down there? Are they working 8 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours? I mean, how long can their stamina last?
I think they work on 12-hour shifts, Garrick. That's what we've been hearing throughout the day. And I was reading one report earlier that it would take between 30 and 60 days, about 2 months, to clear out the entire area. I think what the rescue officials there are doing now is still in this a few days after the attack, still trying to go really slowly, trying to really hear if they can hear anybody from underneath the rubble. We heard yesterday there were some phone calls that were made from some people underneath that rubble, so perhaps the rescue operation is going slowly because they want to make sure that by removing that rubble, they do not create any kind of shifting. There are also buildings in the area there that are structural damages, and therefore the operation is being very slow. But certainly those workers have been working very, very hard, most of them 12-hour shifts, but perhaps some of the rescue operations there, rescue workers there, even working longer hours than that. We've seen a lot of people very tired, but very determined to continue in this operation, that they understand that any life they can save is a good job they can do.
Thank you very much, Alessio Vinci, and I think we can all try to comprehend or grasp, but 12-hour shifts under those conditions, perhaps for another 30 or even 60 days, 2 months to come. Back now to Jonathan and Ralitz in Atlanta.
Garrick, one question for you. People have been commenting on things that we wouldn't notice on television, that there's a strange smell in the air in New York, that there's a strange quiet. You aren't immediately on the scene, but even now in the middle of the night, do you notice that New York feels different?
It started to change this afternoon. Yes, it's still quieter than it is normally at this hour of night or early morning, because even at 2 or 3 a.m. Eastern Time, the streets are filled with traffic. This is a very active place, needless to say. But the city did start to come back to some life today, and it will even more tomorrow. Just to take one example, tomorrow Broadway theaters will reopen. Times Square will have its lights powered up, and once again it'll be crowded because it's far away from the disaster area. As far as the smell is concerned, in Lower Manhattan, there's that mixture of smoke and dust in the air. It's just the smell of smoke and dust in the air. Although, as I mentioned earlier, at one point during this day, a beautiful sunny blue sky day again, the wind shifted and some of that smell was felt in Midtown and in the ritziest, most expensive parts of the city, Fifth Avenue, Central Park, the Upper East Side and West Side. So everybody in Manhattan got a whiff of that today.
Now the air is clearing. Garrick Utley in New York. Thanks very much. Ralitza.
John, people around the world are showing their sympathy as European leaders put up a united front against what they call an attack on the free world. Christiane Amanpour reports from London.
Flags are flown at half-staff in England and around Europe. Flowers pile up at US embassies. Sympathy and especially shock are growing. In the wake of the worst terrorist attack anywhere, on a scale Western leaders say they had never even contemplated, newspapers talk of a declaration of war on America. Politicians from the world's democracies say that today everyone is American.
We all agreed that this attack is an attack not only on America, but on the free and democratic world. It demands our complete and united condemnation, our determination to bring those responsible to justice.
European bosses and brokers suspended trading for a minute to show respect for the dead.
Un minuto di silenzio.
European leaders have called emergency security meetings, and for the first time in its history, NATO has invoked its Cold War treaty that provides for all members to come to the defense of any one of its members under attack.
We stand firm, we stand committed. Thank you very much.
One after the other, world leaders stood up in sympathy and solidarity. President Vladimir Putin saying that Russia will observe a moment of silence on Thursday. German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder says that Germany stands with America and everyone who's for peace and freedom around the world. The same messages came from all European capitals, from Japanese leaders, and the Chinese president as well. There were sour notes sounded too. Some people in some countries said the catastrophe should be a warning to the United States. To have so many people die, though it's unreasonable, is a warning to Bush and his administration not to make policies that bully other countries, says this Chinese taxi driver. Back in Britain, which is one of America's strongest and closest allies, Prince Charles came to offer condolences to the United States ambassador, mindful that many Britons working in New York are likely to be among the victims. Prime Minister Blair said that all European leaders and the president of Russia are trying now to forge a united front to try to identify, defeat and dismantle what he called this machinery of terror. Christiane Amanpour, CNN, London.
Fear is beginning to spread among Arab American and Muslim communities that they may become targets for abuse. As Thelma Gutierrez reports, many believe that the backlash has in fact already begun.
Serene Sawaf is a 21-year-old university student. She is Muslim. She fears her scarf may make her a target.
Women receiving threats, take off your scarf or else we'll shoot you and go back to your country, and just awful, awful remarks. This guy's cool.
Samir, Adam, and Ali were born in California. It is home. Today, they play indoors.
I am afraid that they might start being mean to Muslims like they did 200 years ago to black people.
Tamina Tanir and Fidi Hakim couldn't take their kids to school. The school was closed down for security reasons.
My children go to a Muslim school, and I'm scared for their security.
It's a terrible way to live, they say. After all, they are Americans, Arab Americans.
I feel 100% American. I've been raised here.
I'm really angry too, because you have to understand that even though I'm Muslim, I am American, and I cannot stand it that they did this. I cannot see how there could be any good in bombing the World Trade Center and hurting so many innocent people.
But Islamic centers in many cities are reporting the backlash is starting.
We received reports from New York City of people getting pulled out of their taxi cabs who looked Arab, and they were beaten up, and children who were beaten up.
The terrorist attacks in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania were denounced by Muslim countries throughout the world, including Iran, Libya, and Jordan. In Afghanistan, Taliban leaders accused of harboring terrorists condemned the attacks. So did Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat.
We are completely shocked, completely shocked.
In Texas, 2 mosques were vandalized, their windows either shot out or broken. In San Francisco, California, blood was poured on the sidewalk of an Islamic community center.
I'm blown away because I'd expect that people realize that this is not American. This is completely un-American.
Adam says he hopes people will not confuse him with the bad guys.
I'm just going to try to show that I'm kind and I'm innocent. I'm just a good person.
Thelma Gutierrez, CNN, Los Angeles.
The human cost of this tragedy remains uppermost in people's minds, but economists are also watching the financial implications. Richard Quest joins us now from Europe's financial capital, London, with more. Richard?
Jonathan, you're absolutely right. It is a sad fact, of course, in these situations that even while the bodies are being counted, we have to concern ourselves with the financial implications. But this was indeed an attack on the World Trade Centers at the heart of world capitalism. So let me now update you with what's been happening on the European financial capitals here in London. The world stock markets have been highly volatile since the attack took place, and it's feared, though, that the damage may be far more profound in terms of the markets. Officials at the European Central Bank will meet in Frankfurt later this day to determine whether or not interest rates should be reduced. You can see at the moment what has happened on the commodity markets. Brent crude is now down over $1 a barrel. Gold has also eased off. On the currency rates at the moment, the dollar, which had, of course, weakened, has now put on a bit of strength, now back over 119 Japanese yen. Meanwhile, gold is trading at $279, down $10.80 an ounce. Gold often seen as being the last store of value at times of crisis. Let's catch up with what the markets are expecting in London when they open in just around half an hour's time. Liz George is at the London Stock Exchange to bring us up to date. Liz?
Richard, the mood really here in London at the moment is extremely depressed and very, very quiet. I think we're going to see more of the same today that we saw yesterday, where you see an awful lot of volatility going on there, but extremely thin trading. The mood here definitely is one of wanting to conduct business as usual, really in defiance of the terrible acts that took place in New York. But the impetus just isn't there. And earlier on, I was talking to Jeremy Stretch from the Royal Bank of Canada, and he was saying that really on his trading floor, for most of the day yesterday, they've got big plasma screens, and half the time they were looking at the trading screens, and the other half the time people were literally just standing there watching the news, watching to see what the latest developments were, and the impetus just wasn't really there. An awful lot of depression, people really wanting to find out about their friends and their colleagues who work, of course, in New York. I mean, these two centres have been very, very closely allied, contact on a daily basis with people in New York, and really just a total feeling of shock and a total feeling of depression. The city, as I was walking into the stock exchange this morning, is a little bit busier than it was yesterday, and there is a feeling of wanting to get going and wanting to try and really, in defiance of everything that's happened, keep business going. But people saying that there's no liquidity there because the US markets are closed, and they're really having to wait until the US markets manage to get themselves up again, up and running again. Now, the bond markets in the US will be working today, but of course the equity markets are going to remain closed and are probably going to remain closed possibly until Friday, maybe Monday. What Jeremy Stretcher was saying was that, of course, they can manage to start working again because a lot of these investment houses have got emergency rooms which are away from the financial centre. They're out in places like New Jersey, on the outskirts of New York. In Long Island is where the Bank of Canada's trading room is, and that's where the operations will begin to get going again once the stock exchange in New York manages to get going. But really, again, it's very very depressed. He was saying people just don't really know where to price things at the moment, and the difference between buying and selling prices was just so wide you could drive a truck through it. So it's a real sort of sense of not knowing which way to go. Richard?
Here's George at the London Stock Exchange. Many thanks indeed.